Hey there, interwebs. I hope you're doing well, especially today because, well, today we have a bit of a harder topic to talk about, and one that's kind of difficult for me to discuss right now. Because, as many of you know, on this channel, I generally like to take a look at everything, even the hardest of issues, with the sense of, if not always positivity, an air of being constructive, or at least having humor in the face of such difficult topics or in the face of adversity. And also, I am not a naturally angry person. Like, it is really hard for me to actually ever feel anger. I mean, I can get angry, but it's usually a very fleeting emotion and one that I can't really hold on to all that well. And it's one that I never really honestly even like to share or express with anyone other than the closest of friends without at least having some thoughtful intention behind me sharing that anger, and using that anger to try and say something constructive or positive, like I've done in other videos. And so I say all of that because I want you to know what it means for me to say that I am just making this video because I just need somewhere to constructively vent this anger that I am feeling right now. Because from the moment I heard about Texas Senate Bill 1646, I was just very deeply upset. And I haven't really been able to properly think about it in my normal constructive ways, at least over the past couple days since I've sort of been processing it. And so I'm just making this video to just kind of share my feelings on it, share what this bill is to all of you who may not know what it is, and hopefully to maybe get to something constructive by the end of this video as I sort of talk it out. But either way, even if I don't, I think it's honestly just constructive to share this venting. Because I'm sure that if I'm angry, a person who does not feel that emotion really ever or all that easily and doesn't want to share it, that I'm sure there are many of you out there who probably feel it too. And I just want to let you know that you're not alone in that anger, and especially those who live in Texas, and may be directly affected by this bill. I want you to know that you're not alone in your anger and your pain and your hurt. And also, I should say, I will promise, if this video does not end somewhere constructive, or even if it does end somewhere constructive, I'm going to bring my cat Newt into the end of this video, so at least we'll all end on something positive and fluffy and nice. So just know that that is at least something to look forward to in this video that is probably going to be filled with things that are not great. So let's get into this. Texas Senate Bill 1646 is a bill that was introduced this past Monday, April 12th, 2021, and was sponsored by 12 Republican state lawmakers. And it would brand parents of transgender children in Texas as child abusers if they choose to seek affirming health care for their kids. What that means is that if parents sought gender-affirming care for their trans child, care that most healthcare workers, mental health professionals, and literally a plethora have studies to be found to not only be relatively safe in most cases, but beneficial and life-saving for many transgender children, those parents could face jail time and even have their children taken away from them. Have their children taken away from them because they were seeking medical help for their child. Ripping children away from parents because the parents did not want to see their child suffer needlessly, while the health care that can literally potentially save their life is freely and easily available. What I am talking about, because I know that me saying that sounds vague. So let me talk about some of the specifics here, and I'm gonna bring it down. I promise you I won't stay at that level this whole time. It just gets me there. This law would redefine child abuse in Texas to include, and I'm going to quote the bill here, quote, consenting to or assisting in administering or supplying of a puberty suppression prescription drug or cross-sex hormone to a child, other than an intersex child, for the purpose of gender transitioning or gender reassignment. Basically, the bill would say that if you give puberty blockers, the puberty blocking drugs, to children, that would be considered child abuse. And any doctors and parents who sought that care would be at risk of being charged with child abuse. And that's where they could face jail time, fines, and even having their children taken away from them if they are convicted as a child abuser. So for those of you who don't know, the idea of puberty blocking drugs being given to transgender teens is that those drugs create a kind of pause for these teens on their puberty. Why is that important for transgender teens? Well, going through puberty that does not match one's gender identity for a transgender person can be honestly extremely traumatic and horrifying. Believe me, as a transgender woman who had to go through a male puberty, it really sucks. Like, really, really sucks. For me, what that came out for my personal experience was that I would spend several days a week just crying in the shower as a kid, just wishing my body would stop changing in front of me. And I would spend days hating myself. And I would sometimes even say to myself that I wish I would just die, because my body was slowly shifting and morphing into this thing that I didn't want it to be. That was not me. It's not a fun time for any trans teen. And you know, I was lucky to survive it. I got through it, as many trans teens do, but not without harm, pain, and many emotional scars that I still carry to this day, and many other trans people still carry to this day. It's a thing that I wish I hadn't gone through, you know. I'm happy to be the person who I am today, and who I am today includes that difficult part of my past. And so I don't necessarily wish to erase it, but I really, really wish I hadn't had to have gone through it. And had I been given the chance as a kid to take puberty blockers, I could have avoided that. I could have avoided all of that anguish that I faced as a kid. And not only that, puberty blockers can stop trans bodies from having irrevocable changes from puberty that even taking hormones later on in life as an adult can't change back. There are several parts of my body, for example, that I'm not going to get into specifics about, but that I'm still dysphoric about, that I wish I could have stopped from becoming that way about my body if I had taken puberty blockers. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I love my body. I celebrate my body. I love who I am. I love the way I look today. But there's always this feeling in my brain that of what could have been if I had gone on puberty blockers. Again, it's a pointless thought exercise for me. It never helps, but it's always there. It's always something I could think about, and it's something that could be avoided for so many trans teens. And what's more, that's my story. You know, I lived in a fairly affirming area. I was able to come out relatively young compared to most people, even though it was past my puberty. Many of these different things that I had going for me. And, you know, there are many transgender teens who do make it through this despite all the trauma and pain, and something that they shouldn't have to go through, and puberty blockers would prevent that. But on top of that, there are many transgender teens who don't make it through that, who don't make it through puberty. Going through something like that puberty for transgender teens is, like I said, incredibly traumatic. And having to deal with that, and then also for many other trans teens, also having to deal with the stigma of being transgender, the internalized transphobia and pain you may feel if you don't come out, or the discrimination you face if you do, or even the discrimination you may face if you don't come out either way. All of that, just any combination or mixtures of those factors can be a lot. It can be a lot for anyone, not just transgender people. There is a reason that the suicide rate is so high for the trans community. Part of it is that stigma, as I said, and the hatred, and that's something that we also should be breaking down and fighting against, and all of that stuff. But part of it is having to go through this traumatic part of childhood that many of us are forced to go through that we can prevent. Puberty blockers can prevent that. They don't hurt transgender kids. They don't force us to go through irreversible changes. They just put a pause on puberty and allow trans teens to not only have to not go through potentially the wrong puberty, but allow them to decide later which puberty they do want to go through. And can even allow teens who may think that they're trans and later come to understand that they're not, or maybe they are trans but don't want to pursue hormone treatment, but they don't realize that for a few years until it just gives them the time to come to understand that and realize that. And so when anyone stops treatment or they decide to continue treatment but start other hormones, that's when they can go through what would be considered a normal puberty for whichever gender identity they feel most comfortably fits them. And for those who decide to put a pause on that puberty and end up being like, no, I don't want to pursue, hormone replacement therapy, or I do want to go through this puberty that I would normally have had if I hadn't taken puberty blockers. Well, the only thing that happens to them is they go off of it and they go through puberty later in life, which honestly sounds way better anyways. Even if I wasn't trans, I feel like I would have been more emotionally prepared for puberty as a young adult than I was as a teen when I did go through it. Even if I sort of set aside all of my other trans stuff. This care can literally save lives for transgender teens. And, it's easy, it's safe, and it's caring, and it's available. And it has the backing of numerous members of the medical community, mental care workers, health experts, and numerous support from endless studies on the effects of these drugs. And this law in Texas would say parents who want to have their child not have to suffer by giving them this treatment, that those parents would be child abusers and would rip their families apart. And I want to be very clear here. I empathize with and understand to a degree the emotional reaction that some people have against the idea of giving teens puberty blockers. The science is still ongoing, despite the fact that there are numerous studies that show that it is safe for the most part. There are numerous studies still ongoing. And there has also been a lot of misinformation and political statements and political goals around puberty blockers. There's a lot of talk about trans people in general. There's also been a lot of fear-mongering done around the idea of puberty blockers. I did even a whole video where I empathize and discuss how I totally understand why people are hesitant when it comes to the idea of puberty blockers. I myself was. As I talked about in the other video, and I highly recommend you go watch it because that goes into more depth on it, but my sister went through this same thing as a kid, and I was hesitant about puberty blockers for her. So I get it. And I also understand on top of that how people who are hesitant about puberty blockers may also think that teens may not be capable of making the choice to go on puberty blockers for themselves. Now, for me, I think that infantilizes teens way too much, as I think most teens are capable of making informed medical choices for themselves, and are even more especially capable when they have affirming parents who are also able to help them consent and go over all the informed risks and benefits with them. And this also ignores that this care is typically chosen after a child and parent have discussed it with pediatricians, doctors, mental health care specialists, endocrinologists, and numerous other support groups and allies. So it's never a choice taken lightly. And as I already said, no one is advocating for teens to make choices about their bodies and their lives that they can't take back until they are able to, have time to think about it. No one's saying that a transgender teen should have an irreversible surgery. All that puberty blockers do is allow them a pause. But like I said, I get it. I get where someone might come to different conclusions I am based on emotions, facts that have been presented to them that may be misinformed, or maybe not the whole picture of everything, or maybe they do have the whole picture of everything and still want there to be more science to go on, as well as also the fear-mongering of certain groups that have done against transgender people. So I get where this feeling comes from. I really do, and I talked about that in my other video. That being said, while I think stopping transgender teens from getting puberty blockers is wrong and terrible, as many laws both in the US and the UK have attempted to and sometimes succeeded in doing, as with recently passed bills in Arkansas have done, I can at least on some level understand, emotionally at least, why these bills can find support from the general population, even if I find these bills themselves to be wrong. And even on top of that, when I find most of these bills are not actually done out of caring for transgender teens, but are mostly done by lawmakers, quite often capital R Republicans, to perpetuate this dumb culture war between the left and the right to galvanize voters around an issue that, instead of just legislating, we should be actually having caring conversations about, instead of using transgender kids as game pieces to sort of win votes. But again, I understand emotionally where those laws come from, or at least get support from. I think they come from very disingenuous places. Again, going back to what I was talking about, the culture war stuff. But I understand why they get support. But this law, this Texas bill, labeling parents as child abusers for caring about their child, for seeking to help their child avoid potential trauma and pain, to potentially tear those families apart and tear those parents away from their child because they care for their child, it's disgusting. It is disgustingly wrong. It is unacceptable, and it is cruel. It is intentionally cruel. Do you know why I know it's intentionally cruel? Because not only do puberty blockers have endless research, like I said, showing that they don't harm kids when they're given to them, but we also give these drugs to other kids for other reasons beyond being transgender. And the bill doesn't stop that. As the bill itself points out, there are intersex children who may or may not want these drugs, potentially for similar gender dysphoria reasons. And even beyond that, sometimes other kids are treated with these drugs for numerous other medical reasons, like hormonal issues. So this bill isn't stopping those drugs from being administered in those situations, but no, those are okay. But give those same drugs to a trans child? That's child abuse, according to this bill. This law specifically targets transgender kids and their parents. Because again, the cruelty is the point. The point is to galvanize voters around a seeming common sense issue instead of actually looking at the nuance and the facts and actually wanting to have a conversation that is caring, thoughtful, and includes everybody. This will tear families apart in a political game of chess. It's gross and it's disgusting. And you want to know the other reason I know this is cruel? Because a 10-year-old trans kid, Kai Shapley, had to go in front of the Texas Senate State Affairs Committee on Monday to argue against this bill.
I love ballet, math, science, and geology. I spend my free time with my cats, chickens, FaceTiming my friends, and dreaming of when I will finally meet Dolly Parton. I do not like spending my free time asking adults to make good choices. I've been having to explain myself since I was 3 or 4 years old. Texas legislators have been attacking me since pre-K. I am in 4th grade now. When it comes to bills that target trans youth, I immediately feel angry. It's been very scary and overwhelming. It makes me sad that some politicians use trans kids like me to get votes from people who hate me just because I exist. God made me. God loves me for who I am, and God does not make mistakes. You should be careful how you treat the least of these. Please just listen to me, hear me. Try to educate yourselves. Try to understand everybody. My mom has been giving everything she has to stand up for me. With these new things y'all are trying to do, we both are having to advocate for each other because you are now targeting a great mom and a great nurse. My mom needs her nursing license to take care of me and my siblings. Bullying is bad. Please stop. Don't make bad choices. It's never too late to turn it around. And I want to say thank you to those of you who are sticking up for kids like me. By the time I am in college, you will be celebrated in the history books.
Shapley is honestly one of the most well-spoken people I've ever seen. And dear Lord, she's only 10. I wish I could have even been a modicum of that eloquent as she is at her age. Like, I wasn't even a 10th. I don't even think I'm at her level of eloquence today. This girl is going to have an amazing future ahead of her. But she's also 10 years old. She's a 10-year-old who has to be that eloquent, who has to fight that hard for herself. At 10, on a Monday where she could have been in school, she could have been playing with friends, she could have been doing anything else, she had to go in front of lawmakers to argue for her medical care that is easily available to her. Because Republicans in Texas, as well as many lawmakers around the US and the UK, are attacking her and her right to exist. Her right to exist in a way that not only makes her happy, but healthy. And with her family. And they do it to win votes. As I said, it's gross, it's disgusting, and this law in particular, the cruelty of tearing families apart when they only seek to care for their child, is something that even I someone who tries so hard to understand and has been able to empathize with issues very similar to this, even when I disagree, have to say, I can't understand this. It's gross, cruel, and just plain wrong. All right, everybody. Here's Newt. Newt, say hi. Hi, bud. Yeah. Just gonna pet him for a minute so we can just relax. I know, but it's okay. I love everyone. I love all of you. Thank you for watching. Sorry again that this was such an angry video. This isn't the norm on this channel. Like I said, I try to keep things constructive, positive, and I will always try to do that in the future. But this one hit me. And I needed a place to put it, and I hope that this video, despite the anger, was able to be constructive in some way. At the very least, I hope it allowed those of you watching to know that if you're feeling anger similar to mine, you're not alone. We are never alone in this. The fight continues. The fight for empathy and caring and love and that cherishing of infinite diversity of infinite combinations will always continue, and will always have people who will fight for it. And I'm right here alongside of you. So yeah. I guess that's all I have to say. And Newt says hi too, right, bud? You want to get out of my hands. All right. I love you, bud. Live long and prosper, everybody. Here we go. So I'm finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you want to clap, as I thank you all with this patron rap. Catherine Lambeth, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen, Bo Kikio, Eli Bergmash, Ashlyn Solstice, John Cool, Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Randy Thompson, Felicia Toast, Wellington Marcus, Boyd Earl and Mary Beth Earl, Stephen Schuhart, Wayne Twitchell, Corey Honkinen, and Vale Dunn, A Man Chooses, A Slave Obeys, Ish the Mad, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, John Steele, What Does God Need with a Starship? Michael Beam, Meadow Whisperer, William Steele, Chamomile Tea, BBD, Munir Amlani, Jason Knott, John Weatherby, Maeve Liama, Bree Beecher, Andrew K., Nathan Steele, Sky Skinner, Sean Piper, Flynn, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Tiffany Danger, Cass the Lass, Laura Dermero, Geek Filter, Mari Neckar, Troy Stull, Gretchen Badger, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Bush, Jane Packard, James Krivda, Din, W. Randy E.D., Ellie O'Dare, John H. McDougall, Celestial John, Jacob Tovar, Sarah Bystam, Jessica Chapman, Lysa, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Polly Mina, Andrew Lamoureux, Jennifer Fuss, Zone 1 Librarian, Jenny Mabel, and Michael Hardy. Thank you so much. I hope you appreciate me being a dorky weirdo that's totally off key with any sort of beat, but thank you so much, patrons. I love you all.